Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our show. My name is Eleftheria. I'm community manager here at CrabNebula, and today I have the pleasure to have with me Sid. Sid is not only a designer but also a developer and an open source contributor. If you check his GitHub profile, you will be amazed with all his work. I will leave, of course, all the links in the description below, so feel free to check it by yourself as well. All right, today we are going to talk about a couple of projects built with Tauri, and Sid will explain us these projects. And also in the end of this video, we will talk a little bit about CrabNebula, how it's connected with Tauri, and more specifically about CrabNebula Cloud. And without further ado, let's get started. Sid, would you like to introduce yourself and share a little bit about your background for the folks that may not know you?
Yes. Hey, thanks for inviting me, Lefteria. Pleased to be here. Hi, everyone. I'm Sid. I'm a designer, engineer. Um, I build things on the side. I have recently started work on this small little program called Helmer, which is like a screencasting slash production suite for YouTubers and other content creators. And we're trying to make the process of video creation a lot easier for people so that they don't have to, climb the learning curve of video editing, figuring out so many tools and so on and so forth. That's what I spend my time these days doing. But a side quest of mine is figuring out how do we sort of like contribute back to the open source community since we are reliant on a lot of tools like Tauri and the ecosystem surrounding us. And so every time we sort of run into these smaller problems or find these opportunity spaces where we're like, hey, we can contribute back something in this direction. Um, Me and a few of our teammates, we sort of like pull in some time and build things on the side. So that's what I do.
Nice, amazing. And I think that we will talk a little bit more about some of the stuff that you mentioned. But also, would you like to share a little bit about how you started working with Tauri? And I don't know if you are already familiar with Rust or you are only using Tauri. So, what's your journey here?
Yeah, so interesting question. When we first started making these tools, I was on YouTube looking for, how are people these days making desktop apps. I am primarily, and I have to preface this, I'm not an engineer by qualification. I didn't go to college for computer science or anything like that. I went to college for design, and engineering for me is like, oh, hey, I have this cool idea in my mind. Let me try to put some things together and make it work, right? So, um, my primary background in engineering is mostly around the web. So HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and TypeScript, and the whole React ecosystem. That's sort of where I've lived most of my engineer life in up until I discovered Tauri, right? And so I first discovered Tauri on YouTube looking for ways to make cross-platform desktop apps. And I was very pleasantly surprised to see that it's very purpose built for this use case. Like, hey, you want an app that you want to ship to Windows and Mac OS and Linux and just have it work everywhere, um, while allowing you to write the UI that runs in a web context. That sort of felt like home to me, right? And so I found Tauri, and I like started off a project. I saw how it works, and I was able to make sense out of it. And then I discovered and learned Rust as a side effect of Tauri, essentially, where it's like, oh, hey, to unlock the full power of Tauri, it helps quite a lot if you're able to read and make tweaks in Rust. So that's where it started. But then we are so deep in the systems programming space at this point, working with graphics APIs and doing real time audio and video processing for the tools that we're building. So we very quickly realized that Rust is actually um, a lot of help even outside of the Tauri ecosystem. And so we started, or at least I started investing some of my time in learning the language, building tools with it.
Wow.
Um, and now Rust has become my go-to language, even over TypeScript, which is like where I started from. So these days, most of the projects that I write, they start off in Rust just because I think I've grown to comfortable with the language.
Wow, you have a very impressive journey, starting from being a designer and then learning all this stuff. I don't think a lot of designers do that. Now I think it's time to move on to your project. I think that we can start with Decorum and then we can move on to other things. So, would you like to share your screen and again share a little bit about how you build it? What is Decorum and some nice features or your future plans with it?
Yeah, sure. So because we were building desktop apps and because I'm a designer, there are small details about the experience of using the app that are irksome. If they don't fit just right, like the designer in me is a little unhappy. And so oftentimes we run into these smaller quirks, things like are the traffic lights on macOS in exactly the right position? Do they align well with the app? Does the title bar feel like it is exactly on par with the native window? Does it look like it blends in seamlessly, or does it stand out as if it's a completely separate entity? And so we built this Tauri plugin. We built this plugin for Tauri, which any Tauri app can sort of import and start to use, called Tauri plugin Decorum. Um, I will share my screen. We're on a Windows machine right now, and just to sort of give everyone further context on Decorum, so you have, let's open a bunch of apps, right? Let's open a number of these. I will have like 4 or 5 apps open, and you can see that the title bars in all of them is ever so slightly distinct from each other. This is VS Code. It's an Electron powered app which behaves very similarly to Tauri in that you can write your front end with web technologies and then sort of augment things with Node.js where it needs to be. But this is an Electron app, and you can see that there is a title bar, but um, like taking into account what your VS Code theme is, your title bar could very well be so it could sit so flush against your UI that you don't even look at it as if it's a disconnected entity. Um, Here is the Arc browser, for example, and I think these guys do a very good job of um, designing their UI in a way that feels very native to Mac OS and Windows in these two different apps. So even though it is the same browser and the same app, there are ever so slight modifications um, with what I want to say is like details that make it distinctly suited for one platform or the other, right? In this case, they chose to bring the title bar here, the back and forward buttons are here, and the window controls are towards the right, right? Whereas on Mac OS, it was sort of the opposite order. And so um, I guess we can also look at, say, Discord, for example, right? Like now, Discord is a very different sort of title bar in that it's a lot smaller. You can see the buttons are much smaller, which makes it harder to press, harder to find these buttons and or like click them precisely, given that, let's say, other native Windows apps, like say this one is Photos, for example, huge title bar. Like it's a lot taller than what most other apps are. And we sort of looked at all of these different implementations and we were like, hey, we want to give people a way to choose what style of title bar works best for their app, but along with it provide some opinionated defaults with respect to, hey, if you don't want to make that choice, let us make some assumptions and make them for you. And our starting point on Windows was their design language called WinUI 3. WinUI 3 is Microsoft's latest UI framework, and it sort of prescribes how to think about various elements. You can see on my left-hand side panel there is media, menus, and toolbars, navigation, and they provide a lot of things here. But specifically in the windowing section, you can see there's a title bar, right? And on this title bar, they give you a lot of controls on, hey, this is what the default system title bar is, and you can see that um, it's a black strip on top with an icon, a title, and a few other controls on the right hand side. This is what Windows gives you by default. But as per Microsoft's WinUI 3, you can sort of like see that their new title bar, the one that this UI library provides, is a lot more flush. It doesn't have a separate strip for the title bar. It allows the UI components to sit and occupy the whole space across the window spectrum, and while still giving you access to the minimize, maximize, and close controls. And so we wanted to sort of take this and make it the default for Tauri apps. And if I go back to VS Code, let me minimize out of like a few of these windows. Yeah, but if I go back to VS Code and I say launch our Tauri app, this is a sample Tauri app that we put together for the purposes of this demonstration that spawns two windows. There's a main window and then there's a second window. The only difference is that one of the windows will have a Decorum powered title bar and the other one will have a default Windows title bar. So here are my two windows, right? And you can see distinctly where each one is different from the other. Where if you use the standard Windows sort of like
Nice.
controls, you will have this like black bar, and if you're in light mode, it will sort of change to white. It has all of these controls, whereas on the Decorum title bar, it sort of sits very flush against your UI, feels more at home in the context that it's in, and still allows you full access to all of the native controls. Now, um, Tauri offers options to close, minimize, maximize right out of the box. So creating a look like this one is relatively straightforward, but there are some unique behaviors that are very platform specific. So, for example, on Windows, if you take a native maximize button and you sort of hover over it, you get this menu that allows you to snap things into place. Right? You can very precisely arrange your windows in a certain order, or specify which sort of windows you want to have on your screen. And this control is quite handy, but Tauri doesn't yet give you a built-in way to spawn this window. And so we sort of went out of our way and we filled in the blanks, so to speak, and say, okay, this functionality is kind of hard to replicate in Tauri. Let us implement that in our plugin and offer it to the consumers for their apps. So even in the Decorum powered window, the one that offers you a custom title bar, we make an effort to preserve all of the system behaviors of being able to snap windows into place or be able to drag the window around. The icon changes. If you maximize, it has a restore icon, and if you're sort of like in default size, the icon reflects that. And it also takes into account the light theme and the dark theme, so your icons will always be legible. And so we took a lot of these nuances. There are some on macOS, there are some on Windows. On If I switch to macOS for a bit, and let's open a window. Let's say this is a terminal, so this is what a Mac OS default title bar looks like, which, at least in my view, is very ugly. It's too narrow, it's hard to click, um, and something like a Safari here, which blends in very well with the background of the website that it's sitting on, is really nice. And you can see that the controls are aligned differently to the window. Mac OS even goes as far as to have not custom, but like specific actions that you can do within each of these buttons. So the maximize button, for example, if you hover over it, you get all of this menu controls. You can move it to a different display. You can tile it left, right, or enter the full screen, similar to how Windows gives you these approaches. And so if you use Tauri's built-in methods of close, minimize, maximize, and just make your own button, you lose a lot of these platform-specific functionalities, and our plugin lets you reserve those while still having like a very native feeling title bar. And that's more or less what it is. It's a very simple plugin. There isn't a lot to it. It has a few methods that you can call. If I maximize my VS Code, you can initialize it in the main function of your Tauri app. You can pick a window and then it gives you some helpers with respect to Mac OS. You can set the inside of the position. You can make the window transparent without using Mac OS private APIs. You can set the window level so it's in front of or behind the dock or the mission control on Mac OS. And on Windows, we have this create overlay title bar method, which sort of makes your app looks or makes it have a transparent title bar. And just a small set of these opinionated defaults that we think every app will benefit from. We package that into this plugin, so it's very easy for developers to pull this into their Tauri app and have a nice experience out of the box.
Yeah, I didn't know about all this stuff, so it was really a nice introduction for me. And I know a lot of people are using it because I also saw that it has a lot of stars on GitHub, so that's
Yeah,
amazing.
this one was came as quite a surprise to me as well because we built this for our own use, and then like a lot of people were like, "Hey, can you add this one functionality that's missing?" Or, "Hey, I want to work on this part." So we've had quite a lot of contributors in just the last couple of weeks alone. People find new blanks to fill, contribute code, and then we were able to like debug things together and just ensure that it works really well.
Did you build this alone or with a team?
I built this first alone, mostly for the Windows, the snap layout feature of like being able to summon this menu from Tauri. Um, that's the part that I built, and then after that, um, a lot of people from the Discord, from Tauri's Discord community themselves volunteered to fill in the blanks. But I will say that I had a lot of help and references from other open source projects. So setting the macOS traffic light insets, for example, is a very well documented example in I think Hopscotch's desktop app, which does use Tauri under the hood. So they had this really good example where they had set up the same functionality within their apps, and I was able to sort of like use that as a reference, figure out since I don't write a lot of Objective C code, a lot of the Mac OS specifics of like, hey, what's an ID, what's a pointer, and so on did not make as much sense to me, but their projects were very handy in helping me figure that out.
Yeah, that's amazing. And by the way, I will leave all the links in the description below so people can check all those things on their own. Perfect. I think it's time to move on to our second project or to your second project, which is Micro. Would you also like to talk a little bit about that and yeah, whatever you think it will be useful for our audience?
Yeah, sure. So I Decorum was a consequence of us working on other desktop apps, and like one of them is called Helmer Micro. We were making a lot of multimedia tools that required high performance screen capture and audio capture and so on and so forth. So one of the projects that me and my team have put together over the last few months is this screen capture library for Rust called SCAP. And SCAP super popular. A lot of people use it for X, Y, and Z things. We recently had somebody start using it for building a live broadcasting service. And so SCAP is this screen capture engine that you can use from your Rust project to capture contents on your screen. And as a way to sort of be an example project for this crate, we created a small little app that lets you record really, really high quality GIFs. And we call that Helmer Micro. You can find more details about it at helmer.app/micro. We will, of course, leave this in the description. But um, straight on the website itself, you can see that we have added a few previews here. And all of these previews are not videos, but they're actually just GIFs. And one of the things that we sort of like realized as we were working on multimedia tools is that making really, really good quality GIFs is really, really hard. It's easy when you don't care about quality and you sort of like just have to use it for sharing a meme or two here and there. But there are some very interesting use cases that can come out of having high quality GIFs that we initially hadn't thought of, but the more we explored that, the more the more we felt like there was an opportunity to build a small screen recording tool that only captures GIFs. So one of the very interesting quirks about having high quality GIFs is that um, most platforms like say Twitter or LinkedIn, for example, will very heavily compress a video if you upload that to a tweet or to a post. But the same rules of compression don't really apply when you're uploading GIFs, right? And so if you really want the highest fidelity visual to go alongside your tweet, a GIF is actually a much better option than a videos, because a video will have to like buffer and Twitter will, crush the bit depth that it has, and you'll sort of get these banding artifacts and so on and so forth. It will be slow to load. But with a GIF, like we sort of circumvent all of that and have like a really good polished visual straight from the get-go. So you can see um, that this one, for example, where it's just a simple screen recording of us, like dragging through a set and just showing a feature in an app. These sort of like very niche use case of having access to build a quick GIF was very handy. Here's Ableton Live where we're, clicking around, showing a few graphs and knobs. Here's a 3D project, some code, some carousels in like this travel product I was working on. So just a lot of small details that you can capture and show off using GIFs. And we thought that was a very interesting use case. And it's a pretty simple app. You can just call, say, Micro. It's available on Windows and Mac. And you can use it to create these essentially tweet-sized videos for the things that you're working on, whether it is like showing code or showing a feature. So I have this interesting little animation on the Discord button right here, right? I can hit Command Shift 2. I can select an area that I want to capture. I can start recording, and then I can, play around with it a little. Press stop, and then Micro sort of gives me this interface where I can precisely select how many frames I want, what size I want it on. Should it be like as smooth as it possibly can be? And you can export this to desktop, and you have a really high quality GIF already. Now the app isn't yet like fully complete. We're still in the process of tweaking a few things here and there, maybe rethinking the UI. A lot of these um, drop downs and stuff are just browser defaults. I would love to spend some more time and weave in some details here that I think will be really fun. And it is open source. It's on GitHub. Anybody can go here. They can clone the repo, build it themselves. Or if you'd like to have access to just a finished binary, we do have a link to purchase it from the website. So if you'd like to send a few bucks our way, I would love to see that happen. And then
Guys,
there's a
let's
lot of
support this. Let's support this, guys.
yeah, and so it lets you create really really good looking high quality 60 fps gifs that would otherwise require you to take a lot of screenshots, take them to something like an After Effects or even a Photoshop, and then render that as a GIF somewhere, or run a bunch of terminal commands to get FFmpeg to support the right settings. But with Micro, it's as simple as click a few buttons and you're done.
Yeah, that was really cool. And again, the UI seems very simple. I think everyone can use it very easily. And since your plans are to work a little bit more on that, I think that it's going to be a really amazing product and a lot of people are going to use it. You already mentioned that it's open source, which is really, really cool. What other technologies except of Tauri did you use to build it?
Yeah, so we have it's a Tauri 2.0 project. So sort of use this micro as our testing ground for a lot of new things that we build, right? So it's a SCAP. I already mentioned it's a way for us to demonstrate to other people how to use SCAP in a Tauri app and just in general. We use this project called GIFSky, which is a GIF encoder that can sort of accept a sequence of frames and encode them into really high quality GIFs. It's built using or it's sort of built as a CLI, but then because I record these GIFs like all the time, I wanted like a quicker way of just hitting a keystroke and selecting things on screen, and that's sort of where the motivation to build a small test app like Micro came to be. So Tauri SCAP Gypsy, and of course, like the Decorum plugin is also used here for the same reason as we want our title bar to look really nice. Um, and then I think on the front end, we use Astro to power the UI. Yes, we use Astro for the UI. It lets us have the power of the frameworks in the windows that we need them on, and allow us to only write vanilla HTML and CSS and JS in the more basic windows. So um, that's really handy to have in the context of Tauri. So I think Astro and Tauri pair together really well, and
Yes,
we
yes, I
use like Framer. We use Framer's motion library for the animations that you see. So the animations aren't we haven't done a lot of them just yet, but if I do like this quick recording, so the rotation on the stop button, the the sort of like GIF like flowing into the window, and like those sort of like details we use Framer motion for.
Nice. Thank you for explaining us all this stuff. I'm pretty sure that our audience will also check. And as we were discussing before this video, I know that you have plans to use CrabNebula Cloud. And again, a small thing for the folks that may not know that CrabNebula is the official partner of Tauri, and we are building tools that help Tauri developers. Some of these tools are DevTools, Taurify, and Cloud. So now I think we can talk a little bit about cloud. And I will start by asking you, what were your main hard points that you think cloud can solve them?
Yeah, I think so. One of the things that Tauri does really well is give you a packaged environment, a sandbox that allows you to think of the parts that make your app unique, and it sort of takes over a lot of things like the build process and the distribution and creating an installer. And Tauri abstracts out all of those controls away from you, which I think is really nice. It lets you not have to deal with that and instead focus on what makes your app unique, right? Um, One of the things that's still a challenge with Tauri is that because of the number of platforms that you support, and there are so many different configurations that need to be um, factored into account while you're building a desktop app, we don't yet have a very consistent way of building or like compiling one Tauri code base into multiple different platforms, right? So the way we handle that in micro, and we can go over a few examples here. The way we handle that in micro is that because we were still testing this out and we didn't quite have a know-how of how to approach this, or how to pull things together, we have this repository called, let me check, I think, yeah, it's called micro releases, and we have this GitHub action that lives here. It took me a while to sort of get this to work, and so I was like, okay, let me test this in a repo first, and then figure out how to merge this in. But basically, what this GitHub action does is it will, if I can zoom in a little, it will get the latest micro release version, and this release version is something that we create by going to releases here. So anytime we create this version, you can see that micro as of right now is on v0.3.2. If you can click this draft a new release button, fill in some text, and it will sort of like create a new release for you. This release right here gets fetched by this GitHub action. It checks out to the repo. It sets up all of the Tauri prerequisites. So that's Node.js, that's Rust, it installs the front end dependency, and then it uses a lot of these um, variables to sort of sign your app. And then once you handle all of these, you then get the ability to publish them, or sort of it creates a new release in this repository instead, which is like the micro releases repository. So you can see that there's a v0.3.2 here that matches the other ones, and it has these changes. So there's code sign builds, there's some flashes, and the UI is a little smoother. and we get all of these access to these files here. So there is, um, an installer for Mac OS, a few for Windows, and eventually, as we sort of support Linux, they'll show up here too. And now you have an interesting challenge of, okay, we have these apps, their version, they're published somewhere. Um, the updater in our Tauri app needs access to these files so that it can request them and inform the user that, hey, there is an update that you should be downloading. So you have to serve these on a server at some point. And we do that using another like simple project that we host on Netlify. So now we are on our third repo, right? Like there's micro, which has all of the source code for the app. There's micro releases, which is this GitHub action that builds the things, keeps the files ready. And then there's this third repo for Netlify, where we have this script that sort of like downloads all of those files from our side and then serves them on a simple URL like api.helmer.app/download or something like that, right? Download this. So all of this is needed to ensure that your updater setup is working and so that publishing your app is easy. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work that I wish we didn't have to do since that, maintaining
Yeah.
these three repos is time consuming. You have to manage your own update server and you also have to take into account the maintenance of GitHub Actions, which is very hard to do because sometimes the Windows runner will fail and your Windows app will not build, but your Mac OS app will. Sometimes it will be the other way around. The Mac OS app works, the Windows one doesn't. And I think those things compound very quickly. So one of the
Yeah.
things that we were really looking to explore with CrabNebula, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, is the solution that they have, CrabNebula Cloud. And what I will do is I'll just switch over to the box. So Cloud is sort of this way where it's a service that lets you abstract out this part as well, and it gives you a bunch of things like having access to this dashboard that lets you manage releases from a single place. All you have to do is plug your Crab Nebula dashboard into the GitHub action that I spoke about. And then as soon as you do that, Crab Nebula sort of does the heavy lifting of connecting your updater to the endpoints, creating that server, ensuring things are secure, and it has a CLI which makes it very easy to not have to jump from one repo to another and so on and so forth, but instead just have all of the controls available to your um, straight from your CLI. So I'm very excited to delete a lot of code that we have written and sort of replace that with something that we know we can trust, something that doesn't break because of so and so mistake here and there. And the best part is that for projects that are open source, CrabNebula is very generous with their plans. And I think, to the best of my knowledge, you don't really have to pay anything if you are using CrabNebula to power like open source projects. I'll have to double check on that. But I think even if it means like paying a small fee, I'll be very happy to not have to maintain my own update server and set up the API endpoints and so on and so forth.
Yeah, exactly. All those things that you mentioned were the pain points for a lot of folks, and that's why
Yeah.
our team is creating CrabNebula Cloud. We are also still working on that, so many changes, updates, and more benefits will come soon. Right now, there is also a free trial, a 14 days free trial. So for the folks again that are thinking about it, I will totally suggest you to checking it out. And we have a Discord community as well. So if you have any questions, if you need any support, you can go there. We are still working on our documentation. You can find a lot of stuff, but also more stuff are coming. That's it about CrabNebula Cloud. I think we are coming in the end of this video. So I have one more question for you. What
Yes,
are
please.
your plans for the future? Will you continue working on these projects? Do you have in mind another project that you would like to build, or do you have any conclusion for us?
Yeah, well, so I've been mentioning multimedia tools quite a bit throughout our conversation, and um, we are a small team of like 6 people here at Helmer. It's the company that I run that sort of like is behind the scenes doing all the work for a lot of this. And Helmer, we imagine as a screen recording and broadcasting app for a lot of creative professionals, whether you are a designer who wants to, create a quick portfolio, or you're a YouTuber who wants to write a video essay. So to power use cases like that, we're working on a really powerful, comprehensive desktop app that sort of makes that job a lot easier. And a lot of things that we spoke about so far, micro, SCAP, um, the Decorum plugin. All of these are sort of like little details that we're figuring out as we bring our like main Helmer app to life. And we, as we go, we sort of like keep open sourcing parts of our work. So SCAP, our capture engine that records really high quality footage from your screen, that's open source. Decorum plugin is open source. I'm pretty sure a lot of our additional Tauri functionality that we built on top of that will also be open source very soon. And so the goal that I have over the coming, I want to say like 6 to 8 months, is to really refine the experience of video creation with our app Helmer. Helmer is closed source for now. We do eventually plan to open source a lot of the inner workings of it as best we can, but we're sort of still in the process of figuring out things like how does pricing and monetization work? How do we build this into a sustainable business? How do we as a team um, ensure that we are creating a lot of value outside of Helmer and its ecosystem by contributing back to open source? How do we, sort of lift the average and push more people to make even higher quality desktop apps? And so I think just being immersed in Helmer and continuing to figure out and work on these small open source projects that we do on the side every now and then, that's continuing to be my goal for the next 6 to 8 months.
Well, thank you very much for watching this video. If you have any questions for Sid, I will leave his links in the description below, and I'm sure he would love to chat with you as well. Go check his project, support his work. If you want, also check CrabNebula Cloud. If you have any questions, leave comments below, and see you very soon with another video. Bye!
Bye bye. Have a nice day.